Today's video is, can France and the United Kingdom defend Europe? And what I mean by can they defend Europe is, can they pose a credible deterrence with their nuclear forces against Russia? A lot of stuff's in the news, and if you follow some of the online defense kind of communities, which I'd highly encourage you not to, because there's so many awful takes you'll find on there. But if you do, there's a lot of talk about the United States is no longer going to defend Europe. Europe needs to have to stand on its own. And, quite frankly, they really should be able to stand on their own defense wise. But the idea that, NATO for all intents and purposes, et cetera, which I'm not going to get into that, whether it's valid or not in this video. But what I do want to talk about is, can the French and United Kingdom strategic forces that are operationally deployed, can they pose a credible deterrent to Russia? So when it comes to stockpiles of weapons, Russia and the United States are on parity, about 1,700 operational warheads deployed, roughly about 5,000 overall. So there's operation deployed, there's those that are held in reserve, and then those awaiting destruction. And they're roughly about the same. Russia has a little bit more varied delivery systems. The United States has more strategic level systems, but it's still fairly close. From there, it's China, roughly estimated about 500. Then you would have France, and then goes from there. So France, I think, is roughly just over about 300 warheads. I don't have it in front of me, but it's roughly about 300. And the United Kingdom is less than that. The United Kingdom only has a sea-based nuclear armament, the Trident missile, which United States shares with them. France has both sea and air-based weapons delivery systems, so it does have a little bit more options there. In this scenario, you'll see that I've forward deployed French air-based weapons. This isn't representing that they would be forward deployed in the scenario so much as just with air-to-air refueling, they will have a greater range. And rather than try to set up internally in this simulator, it's if I say it's just easier to forward deploy them. So this would represent more of a last air-to-air refueling setup. They also have 3 French nuclear subs and 1 British sub deployed and 2 marooned. Not marooned, but I'm sorry. 1 deployed and 1 docked, which will both be available for use. I have pre-laid out attack locations for the UK. These are going to be a mix of air and surface burst. You have across several city locations. You have French air attack and French naval attack. These are purely counter value strikes. What I mean by that is they're targeting city locations. And again, this is about how much credible damage can France and United Kingdom do with their nuclear deployments that Russia would have to keep in the back of their minds, that if they're engaged in a conflict or escalatory conflict, that the end result of the danger they're putting their own populace under. So some people might watch that and say, well, Putin doesn't care about his own populace. Look, everybody cares to some level or another. Nobody, even if it's somebody with a dictatorship, nobody wants to cause irrevocable harm to their people or country. They're not going to have anything left to rule over. So take a look at this. Now what you're seeing, some people may say, well, yes, United Kingdom and France can do this, but Russia could hit them over many, many times over. Well, of course, this isn't about whether Russia presents a credible nuclear arsenal as a deterrent to France and the United Kingdom. Everybody knows they have a credible deterrent. They have a very large stockpile. That's without question. This is about whether or not France and the United Kingdom, without support of the United States, if they offer a credible deterrent. Take a look real fast at all three. I think you can tell just from the graphic the answer to that question is probably yes. But let's take a look at what it would be like. I set this to run hypothetically April 13th this year. Let's go ahead and execute all plans. And let's start the sim. So already you're going to see subs and air assets are firing off. Let's go ahead and slow it down a little bit here. So some of the air-launched cruise missiles from the French fighters are already landing. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing the warheads starting to break off from the actual rockets. That's where you get the red triangles. And then many of these are MIRVed. In fact, all the sea-based ones are. You also see that Russia has an anti-ballistic missile system ringing around Moscow, and those are firing off. So several of the warheads are targeting Moscow, so there is chances of interception, and we actually see some level of interception going on. You see here the sheer number of warheads, even from, like I said, these are France and the United Kingdom, which have a fraction of the warhead stockpile that the United States or Russia would have. It's still an overwhelming number. So as I'm making the video, one of the big things in the news is that recent meeting they had in front of cameras for whatever reason with Trump and Vance and Zelensky. I highly encourage anybody, watch the full video. Don't just take the bits and pieces you're seeing. Everything is so politically charged right now. You can't just take what people post and what they say, even the main, whether it's mainstream media, social media, commentators, anything. Don't take it just with face value. There are people that no matter what, everything that Trump does is horrific, horrible. He's a dictator. And there are people that no matter what Trump does, he's the greatest thing on earth. You know, he's the God Emperor. Truth is, anybody that's a free thinking person should be able to understand that nothing is ever 100%. So I highly encourage you, watch the full video, think about it, and come away with your own opinion on it. All right, everything has landed now. I'm going to calculate casualties. Move this into the frame. 35.5 million. That is roughly 25% of the Russian population. We did have a fractional number of Ukraine casualties, I'm sure, due to fallout. Excuse me. I don't make any money in these videos, so I'm not going to reshoot just because I had a little hiccup there. So what do we see here? 35.5 million fatalities right away. 1.1, almost 1.2 million cancer fatalities. Over 1.3 million square kilometers evacuated. It's obviously an enormous area that would have to be evacuated. And as always with these casualties over the next several weeks, not just cancer fatalities, but famine, disease, starvation, you would have much higher numbers. You could easily see, just based on the French and UK deterrent, we could be looking at a loss of 50% of their population. Just scroll through here real fast. I don't think we saw too much losses in other countries. Some in Kazakhstan, that kind of makes sense. evacuated areas and some cancer fatalities. No direct losses right away. It's a little slow to. Not seeing too much outside of Ukraine, Kazakhstan. Obviously, there's Russia there. So it looked like casualties were relatively contained. Let's take a look at short-term fallout. Obviously, it corresponds to where missiles were dropped. St. Petersburg, second largest urban population, metropolitan population in Russia. Obviously, a huge amount of casualties there. Moscow, I mean, absolutely lit up. Let me go ahead and take these off so we're not confusing each other. I'm gonna just total devastation. That'd be uninhabitable. Let's take a look at fallout long term. So long term, we're going to see even more drifting. Guessing the Ukrainian losses would be right around here. Perhaps you know this is obviously the area that is contested with Russia. I wonder how much population is actually still living in this area at the present time. So the answer is obviously this. Their strategic rocket forces represent a highly credible threat, a credible deterrent. From that perspective, Russia will always have to keep that in mind. That yes, they possess the capability to cause an immense amount of casualties across all of Europe, all NATO countries, but NATO countries, even without the United States, also 50% of your population loss. Okay, maybe you killed more of them than they killed of you, but your country ceases to exist at that point as a functioning, unified country. Your surviving populace is probably not going to be too happy with you in a lot of cases. That things led to that point. I would imagine there might be some hostility across the board. Um, there would be, not going to talk, it's not going to be the end of the world, loss of humanity, or even, there's going to be several areas in Russia that would, under this attack plan in particular, clearly across Siberia and stuff. But the loss of manufacturing, food, it would be absolutely devastating. And it would be devastating to Europe as well, even if Russia was not striking back, which they would, but even if they weren't, this would still be devastating. The world is so interconnected with things, you can't take out half a country or more and expect it, especially a major world player, and expect it not to have huge ramifications. So that's the video. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Hope that there's some solution to peace in the Ukraine here sometime in the near future, and that it can be suitable for all parties and people stop this senseless waste of death, and legitimate concerns are addressed and taken care of. But there we go. Thanks, everyone.